like to thank my previous presenters, colleagues. And Agnes just said, we don't want to have one East Timor and another East Timor. We don't want to have one Australia and another Australia. But there is one Australia and there is another Australia. And everybody knows we do have federation in Australia, and we have 8 jurisdictions, with Commonwealth being the 9th. And that's what's not at the forefront of people's minds. So for example, I will just give you a couple of examples, 2 examples today. This is 18 plus computer games. So Mortal Kombat. Some of you might not be playing it, but your children or somebody in your control might be. So especially if you have teenage children. So if you keep it on your mobile or computer with other computer games in Northern Territory, that's not a problem. You take the same laptop, go to Western Australia, you get $500 fine. You take the same laptop, you go to South Australia, you get $5,000 fine.
Times 10.
No other states is the problem. If you play these computer games with minor, so any person under 18 years old, and in Tasmania, you get the fine of $2,600. So $2,600, that's okay. Pay the money. But in Northern Territory, here, you pay $14,000 and $14,100 for the same offense. This is the beginning. Then there are many, this is just a couple of examples. There are many other differences. Simple driver's license. This is the example courtesy of Valerie, who is here in the room. Thank you for giving this example. So this is the example. So if you are a diabetic and you have to apply for license, for driver's license, simple driver's license, in ACT, Australian Capital Territory, you have to have vision test at the age 50, 60, 65, 70, 75, and then annually thereafter. In Victoria, you have to do the test only if somebody reports you. That's it. Only if somebody is suspicious about your driving. In Western Australia, you have to do it annually after 80 years old, if you are diabetic. And Valerie reported to us that you will have a lot of fun transferring your license across the states. And this is in the population, in the state that has population of under 25 million people. And this is also in the state that has population that is the most residentially mobile in the world. And it's going to only increase. So how did this problem come to my attention? Of course, as you might have noticed, I'm talking about legislation, I'm a lawyer. But I have worked as a legislative drafter. These are the people who write the laws. This is the joke we had in the office. This is nothing to do with the truth, because we had to read a lot of legislation. But that was the joke. And I was involved in drafting the bill for classification of fields and computer games and e-conveyancing, national uniform legislation bill. What came to my attention is that a lot of attention is paid at harmonizing legislation across Australia, but unfortunately not the same attention is paid to sustaining this uniformity going forward. We can't ensure that the same legislation goes through simply because everything is changing. We have to change legislation and states, so we have 9 jurisdictions, and they approach changes differently. So with all this attention spent on achieving uniformity, not the same attention is spent on sustaining this uniformity. So my research question was, what makes uniformity in some sets of uniform acts last, while in others doesn't? How we, as legislative draftees, can help policymakers, those people who have to change the law, how we can help them to understand what's happening better and give better advice. When I'm talking about harmonization that lasts, I called it sustainable uniformity because there is nobody's talking about it. It's not a big problem. Some people do not consider it as a big problem, but I do, of course. And what I'm I'm talking about is ability of legislation to change to future developments in uniform way. So we don't only enact it as uniform, we also continue it as a uniform going forward. It's very hard. It's very, very hard to do because of changes. Everything is changes. We have to deal with federalism, changing governments. We have to deal with wicked problems. That's how they are called. They're wicked because they are very complex and there is no one simple solution to them. We have to do it with deadlines. We have to do with, and you would have thought that it's easier to make jurisdictions to make little change to come to the common denominator, but in fact, it's actually harder. It has been proven by research. It's harder to make the change, which is little. It's actually easier to make jurisdictions to come to the common denominator when changes are bigger. So first of all, we have to look. Okay, is it really worth checking? Is it really worth solving this problem? Is it really something we have to think about? Yes, we have, because this is the trend. This is the trend of growth of harmonization and national uniform legislation. The trend is unlikely to stop. It's going to continue. Of course, with some governments it will ease off, and some governments it will continue. As you know, some conservative governments. So I will not go into that. But yes, as you know, some governments are more active on uniformity, and some are more active on the in the other areas. But the trend itself is likely to continue, and there are the factors that are driving it, and they're beyond our control. And these are just simple, easy dissemination of information. Right now, a lot of information, as we have heard today in our keynote address, information is everywhere. Information is free, available, we all can access it. There are strong political factors driving uniformity, harmonization. We have increased trade from economic perspective. We have social factors changing, like we had the postal vote just only last year, yes, I think last year. And internet that creates the playing field for everybody in the same way. So when I was looking at this research, I had to come up with some different methodology. Usually as lawyers, we use the doctrinal method. We look at the legislation and we consider it. And this is the microscope. So that's the legislative drafter just takes the act and dissects it to pieces. And Maria is one of the students who have completed Ph.D. and Dr. Maria. That's exactly what she used. That's what lawyers were using traditionally. Doctrinally, we are looking at the microscopic detail of every word and how it stands and everything else. On the other hand, we have public policy. Public policy looks at law as a planet, and it uses telescope. So we are a bit removed. But we needed a bit something different, and we needed binoculars. We needed to look at it close enough, but not on microscopic level. And we looked at the law as data methods, and we came up with some approach. So I have a question for you, especially with presentation from Dr. Ben in the morning, how he was talking about fake or just simply available news, available information. What do you think? Harmonization in which area of law in Australia is the most prominent, is the most widespread? What do we harmonize the most in Australia? What do you think? What do you remember from news? You don't have to, just your guess, wild guess.
Income tax.
Income tax, fantastic.
Security.
Security, good.
Federal legislation, really.
Federal legislation, that is fantastic.
Criminal.
Oh.
There's a movement.
Expert in criminal. The problem, usually, if you ask this question, the answer will be commercial law, corporate law. That's economic integration. That's what we are usually. That's what usually harmonizing. But because I have expert in law right here, he gave my answer between jurisdictions, commercial, corporate law, transport, government. So we have, Valerie, that's to you that we are trying to harmonize road regulation. It's not happening. It's not happening, obviously. And but in some other areas, so for example, in the marine transport or airplanes with air transport, of course, it's fully harmonized. And as you can see with Dina's, so intellectual property is here, Dina's presentation, intellectual property. In Australia, it's harmonized because it comes from Commonwealth, as you know. Yeah, so, and in this sense, we don't need harmonization by jurisdictions. So with these binoculars, if you look at all sets of uniform acts, it's complicated. You don't have to. It's complicated. But you look at this at legislation, and you can come up with 4 big groups. I will not get to them. So we'll just get 4 big groups of legislation. All I want you to remember is this one is bigger, that one is a little bit smaller, and this area, we can't harmonize this area. We make a lot of attempts, and we are trying, and we are still struggling with this. So first we will talk about big group, then that group, then this group, and then we will talk about the one that is too hard basket. Yes, it's really hard for us. So first group, is when we harmonize legislation step by step. And example is Corporations Act. Took us 100 years, even a little bit more than 100 years, and we still have differences. Not everybody knows, but Corporations Act, corporations in Australia are regulated by uniform legislation, but there are still state differences. So still, even if we move to it step by step, hundreds of years, it still might not be fully uniform. Another way of harmonizing legislation is foray into legislation. Just quick, that goes through multiple stream theory. Window of opportunity opens, and legislation gets harmonized almost overnight, usually within 2 years in Australia. That happened with counter-terrorism legislation. All of a sudden, 9/11 happens, London attacks happen, and security is on everybody's mind, and we have decided, no, we actually need uniform approach for all of Australia. And before that, it was extremely not uniform, and after that, extremely uniform, and it's probably one of the most uniform areas of harmonized legislation all across 9 jurisdictions. Then we have work choices. I just almost arrived to Australia, and then I heard everybody talks about work choices, and it was really big news on the day. That was overruled by, as we now know, by fair work legislation. But work choices, due to unique distribution of powers, got into uniform level also almost overnight. The news were phenomenal. Some people said that it was the beginning of downfall of Howard government, but nevertheless, this reform brought to uniformity something that has been not uniform for ages, and then it became vulnerable due to unpopular policy and has been overruled by Fair Work Act. So this is second group of legislation we can see through our binoculars, step by step foray, so elevation to uniformity, and then sometimes we just agree to disagree. We just say, it's really hard, and we just will not be able to make it uniform. Let's do a pragmatic decision. Let's make just pragmatic shortcut to uniformity. It will not be ideal, but we will deal with it. So basically, one of the examples is mutual recognition. For example, if they have said, all the states just accept whatever the other state has issued as a driver's license, and we will just accept that. And then that would have been a pragmatic solution, but it's not happening. Because road rules belong to the advocacy coalition group. In this group, this is, as you remember, it's the fourth group of uniform acts. After I remember finding a document from almost maybe 1800. Craig, you will be interested. 1800, and it was talking about harmonization of road rules when we had horse carts. So they were talking that we have to have the same rules for horses across jurisdictions. We still didn't get there. After so many calls for harmonization, we still didn't get there. So the research identifies that criminal law, regulation of minors, and road regulation falls into this group. So this is schematic of one group, decades to harmonization, one group, quick elevation, and one group is shortcut. With advocacy coalitions, we just can't get there. Okay, my time is up, so I'm summing up quickly. Harmonization is a trend. It's likely to continue. Instead of looking at only achieving uniformity, we have to look at sustaining it going forward as well. In sustaining, the roadmap to harmonization will help us because we will be able to identify in which group of legislation their particular set of uniform acts falls into. And if we will go back to our first example of computer games, you will see straight away. It falls into A, criminal law, B, regulation of minors. This is where advocacy coalition frameworks really got their turf, and they're not willing to change their opinion easily. They can, but it's not going to, not something that is going to be easily achieved. So that's the binoculars. That's what this approach gives us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for that very interesting